Holy cow. Was my voice just muted the whole time through that? Because I did the intro and everything. So things are great so far.
Yeah,
Things are great.
I just heard ominous music, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." As I'm reading these show notes and
I
vibing.
didn't intend to do that. All right. Well, here, the Comic Binge
Take
presents
take take two.
a sub-series dedicated to one of the most divisive and imaginative mainstream comic book runs ever created with an iconic character. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a long time to Knights Never Die, Grant Morrison's Batman, issue by issue. Uh, it has been a while. Sorry about that. It's just schedules are a difficult thing to make work when we all have kids, we all have full-time jobs. Some of us with full-time jobs with irregular schedules, and we want to make sure that everybody has the energy to attack these stories the way that they deserve to be attacked in a wide-ranging and detail-oriented conversation like we like to have. I am Chris Clow, co-host of the Comic Binge, joined by my two partners in crime fighting here, Paul Herman, the founding father of the Comic Binge, and Mr. Javi Trujillo, uh, a brother in all but blood. So
Wait, hold on. I am not the founder. You are a co-founder too. You are with me.
the idea came from your brain.
Oh,
You
he
are the
started it.
founding father. It
No,
incepted in
we
your
are founding
mind
fathers. No,
before you
we
pushed it into the world.
we
Look,
are founding fathers. I had the semantics, but yeah, it's we,
okay,
not I.
well,
We.
I appreciate the recognition, and thank you to the folks who are checking in on the streams wherever you're coming from. Looks like oh, look at that. A premium account on X is required to create live broadcasts on their platform. So we're not streaming directly on X. So those of you who jumped over to YouTube from that platform, welcome. Much appreciated. Today we're taking a little bit of a detour. You might remember that or maybe you remember, you might not, considering how long it's been. But the last time we got together for Knights Never Die was for Batman number 658, which was the conclusion to the introductory story of the ongoing run, Batman and Son, that introduced Damian Wayne into the DC universe for the first time and set pretty much everything in motion. Uh, After Batman and Son, there was a little bit of a delay. I assume to give the creative team a little bit more time, although I'm not totally sure on the specific details at this point. But John Ostrander jumped in for 4 issues, 659 to 662, pitch hitting a little bit, and then 663 is when the run picks back up. 663 is a fascinating story that I'm sure is going to engender a lot of opinions, both from ourselves and from people who are interested in watching it. But before we get there, it seemed prudent to take a little bit of a detour into the madhouse. In 1989, a very young Grant Morrison, at least comparatively, collaborated with visionary artist Dave McKean to create a story called Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. And that's what we're talking about today. There's just one brief glimpse. Chances are, if you're here, you know about this story. It is seen as a highly influential work in Batman's history. It was exceedingly popular. DC made an incredibly shrewd and prudent business decision by releasing it around the time that the hype machine for the 1989 film was kicking into full gear, and the book sold a lot of copies as a result. So it's going to be it's going to be really interesting. This is 663 is going to be definitely one of the most controversial issues of the entire run. But before we jump into a discussion about Arkham Asylum specifically, of course, written by Grant Morrison, incredibly unique, fully painted pages by Dave McKean, and the singular talent of the late Gaspar Saladino, who created the very, very unconventional lettering. We definitely want to make sure that that his name is spoken. But let's talk about the journey that you guys have gone through and just your own perceptions of this story, especially, reading it in concert with the ongoing run, one of us for the first time. Javi, before we kick it over to Paul, who had not read this story before this conversation, which is a critical element to have in the full discussion, why don't you give us your thoughts overall on Arkham Asylum: A Serious House on Serious Earth?
It's a complicated one, man. I was 12 in 1989, the summer of Batman, and it to say it was a different world is an understatement. And there was no DC Universe Infinite. Comic shops I was not mobile enough to go to comic shops on my own. So a lot of exposure to comics came from trips to the grocery store where they had comics in the magazine aisle. Or if we went to the mall, there was a store called Walden Books or B. Dalton. And I would just go to the little section they had.
B. Dalton represent, by the way, Javi.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut right there. Oh, I love
it. And I would go check out and see what they had. And that's really where a lot of my exposure to graphic novels came from at first, was that small little section where they had Batman Year One and A Death in the Family and Son of the Demon, and this little book called Arkham Asylum. And this is a first printing. I don't know when I got this soft cover. It was probably early 90s, but as you can see, hit me up here, Paul. It's got a little suggested for mature readers sign, and it was not unlike anything I'd really seen before. The Killing Joke had that as well. Dark Knight didn't, but it was, I don't know. It was so outside my regular Batman wheelhouse, and just kind of flipping through it, like I didn't know what to make of it, and seeing this, to me, disturbing art and just horrific visuals of pain and torture, and everything was so just out there. I'm trying to find the image. There's an image of Arkham's mom where she just had like bugs just falling out of her mouth, and like that horrified me as a 12-year-old. And as such, like it wasn't something like I gravitated towards a lot. I remember like reading it and like listening to like the Batman Returns soundtrack, or had like a CD single of Nine Inch Nails Closer that had all these weird variations of it. And it just put me in like a weird headspace to like get into this mindset. That's the image that just like freaked me the hell out. And then so jumping forward a few years to the mid 90s when Morrison's on JLA, it's like, oh, I love this Batman. Like he's so just cool and suave, and he's got an answer for everything. He's in control. And so I was trying to justify, or not justify, reconcile the Grant Morrison Batman from JLA and the Grant Morrison Batman from this book. And every now and then I go back and revisit it, and it's just like, I understand why people like it, because I can appreciate the talent. I mean, the obvious talent behind it. And then they would like package this with the video game. I feel like there was a version, or maybe it was the animated movie that was tied into the video game, where it would have like the movie and like the hardcover. But it's just like, it's such a unique beast that I don't know how to quantify it. And then the Batman Book Club came around, and host Ryan Lauer covered it with, I believe, the champion of Long Island, Eric Holzman. And they talked about the absolute versions and the notes and everything. And eventually I got this nice deluxe hardcover edition, which has much of the same supplemental material, including the script. And it's been colored, not recolored, but like the art has been remastered, and it's a little bit more vibrant. It's a little easier to make out what's going on, even though a lot of it is still in shadow. And so that brings us to this show where something happened reading it for this show. And after 30 years, something clicked. And I was just kind of transported away and locked in there with them. And just the mythic power of this story. I mean, to put it mildly, and I don't know. I was in the story in a way I'd never been before. And just the horror was even more visceral. And I got welcomed in and just into this nightmare. And it's not for everybody. It's very untraditional. But I something about reading it this time, it became just one of my favorite Batman books. And I don't know why. Wow. It's just, it's not like top favorite, but definitely it stands up there now with some of the classics.
Javi, sure. Can I ask, and you can tell me to shut the hell up if I'm off base here. But the time I've known you, and I knew you've always loved comics, but since you've been joining the show as like pretty much a permanent co-host now, it feels like in the last couple of years you've really upped your, I would say, passion for comics. It's just from my own perspective, right? Like that's just, maybe I'm crazy, and what I'm getting at is, would you, and again, if I'm full of shite, just let me know. But it feels like maybe like you kind of you're looking at it at a different perspective now, because you're understanding the stories of how comics are done a little. Maybe I'm crazy, but like just now you're appreciating the art of having consumed even more comics recently and getting really more into the medium and how things work and everything, and maybe even more into Batman at this point. All those things combined have made you kind of appreciate the story more. Am I off base here? Maybe I am.
I would say you're off base, because it's always, comics have always been a major hobby of mine. It's just, I think, reading this at 12 or 14 and then reading it as a 47-year-old, I'm able to pick
47.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just think I'm able to analyze things a lot better than I could as a teenager. I understand story more because I've read so many more stories and the power of some of these panels and images, and it hits differently. It's like, I remember watching Goodfellas in high school and just like being blown away by it and loving it, and then revisiting it, I don't know, like 10 years after the fact, and then being like, oh, that's why I had such a reaction, because this shot is powerful and how he moves the camera here is powerful, and using this color for this scene makes it powerful. And going back to some of these things that I read as a kid, like I'm having that fresh set of eyes on it. The story's still the same story, but it's just, I'm different now as I see it. And I've said it on like a dozen podcasts. Like when I was a teenager, it was, I liked John Romita Sr. more than I liked Jr. And I liked Jim Aparo more than like Kelly Jones. And, oh my God, I'm blanking. Tom Grummett more than like John Bogdanov.
Dude, Grummet's amazing, by the way.
These classic looking artists. And as I've gotten older, it's like, okay, I can appreciate and understand these different styles now, and I get why people loved them. Like Kelly Jones, like he's so like just out there, right? But I love his stuff now, and I didn't then. And I had to pay the price for that ignorance by having to pay more to own those Batman comics than if I would have bought them off the newsstand back in the day. So, and it's the same with like Frank Miller. Like the first issue of Dark Knight Returns I got was the third one. And it was just like, oh, like this art, everything about it is ugly. And now I can appreciate that era of Miller so much more and see like the beauty in it, where I didn't back in the day. So I think there's a lot of that going into this.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, a lot of people, especially, in more recent times, let's say over the past 20 years, have described the book as maybe a little too opaque to really get inside the story. There's maybe a little too abstract in the way that it is presented.
Yeah.
Did you previously read the script when you first got that collected edition that contained it? And how much did that make a difference in your appreciation of the book?
No, I didn't read the script until after I read this again in the deluxe.
Okay.
So I read it again, and I was texting you guys as I was reading it, and like I'd read it in my book, and then I'd go to DC Universe and then take a screen grab and just, send you guys like these pictures of like this ethereal Batman who he never really comes into, he's always a shape. And I was thinking about like tonight, like what kind of Batman shirt should I wear? Like just the black bat, or like do I bust out with the yellow oval, which was era appropriate? But like, you don't see that. You never really see, he's not really a man in this story at all. Up and only like when he's doing the thing with the glass in his hand, does he like get some kind of humanity that we get close enough to see details, but we never even see like his chest logo.
Yeah.
So, but there was something about reading it this time that I responded to. And then I went and did all the supplementary stuff. And then it was like, it just took it up even like another level of like understanding of what was going on, the things that Morrison was trying to do. And then hearing the stories of like McKean, who just like, he didn't want anything to do with this whatsoever. Like didn't want to do Batman at all, but like Morrison had talked him into it basically. It's just a fascinating like story of how like all these elements came together for this one thing that keeps getting referred to over and over again.
That
in like different
Silver-tongued
media.
Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sounds like quite a journey. Paul, before you jump in, just to set the table a little bit for folks. So you had never read this.
Nope.
And then you did, and you had a reaction, which you will share, I'm sure.
I think I need to get my popcorn quick.
Get the popcorn ready.
And then we encouraged you to also take a look at that supplementary material,
which I owned already digitally.
Right. Yeah. And it seemed like things might have shifted a little bit. And as someone who is a student of the game in terms of the creation of comics, I'm sure that there's a lot to chew on with all that stuff. How does everything come together for you?
Well, so for those who don't know, I love Batman a lot. But I haven't gone through every single Batman story of all time. This is one of the probably one of the last glaring things I haven't read, to be honest, that I should have already. It's ridiculous that I haven't done so yet. And it's not a matter of just I didn't want to or didn't care or thought it looked bad. I just never got around to it and kind of forgot. And I remember hearing about Arkham Asylum a decent amount when I was a kid, but not a lot, to be honest. As someone who read Wizard magazine a lot and was at comic shops, this was one I never heard that much about. But I still would hear bits and pieces of it. And I bought it digitally to read it years ago when Comixology RIP was still on here. And I got it for like $5 digitally, and so it had all that ancillary material you guys were talking about. I never read it, just never got around to it. And when you wanted to go through the Grant Morrison run and you want to do a little side tangent on Arkham Asylum, it was obviously set up perfectly. And that's the thing I've always said about the binge, right? Is that it helps all of us make us read stuff we need to at some point. So like, or if you're Chris, you're not staying current with stuff you want to be staying current on. So we make you read it like Superman War World, right? So I mean, it's one of those things where the binge definitely helps all of us read things we need to, whether it be again or it's good homework, is what I'm saying.
That PKJ omnibus has another customer. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, I listen. I don't like omnibuses, but I've been buying the trades. I just got caught up with the latest trade, and it's fantastic, as Javi has told me. So you weren't wrong, El Corazon. So all that to be said. Chris, ironically, was there, I think, when I bought this version of Arkham. Were you there? I'm pretty sure you were there.
Atlas, wasn't it?
Or Ancient.
Ancient, yeah.
Yeah, Ancient Comics. Rest in
Atlas
peace.
is in Chicago. Yeah.
Same difference. Which, by the way, Chris, I think I told you he's coming back at some point. So thankfully, hopefully it comes back. But I got this for a sweet price, very cheap. And I was like, yeah, I want to own a physical copy because it's an important thing. I love Grant Morrison stuff. And so whatever. And when we wanted to finally read it, I read it, and my reaction of reading it was, this is all right. Wasn't my favorite thing in the world. I'll be honest. I think Grant Morrison's written a lot of better stories, and I think this one is fine. The art obviously is very stylized and specific. And I know Dave is it Dave? What's his name? Dave McKean.
Dave McKean
obviously has done work with Neil Gaiman on Sandman. That's why I kind of knew him from. And even though I haven't read much Sandman, I knew him from that. Like I knew that he was associated with Neil Gaiman and things like that. And the thing about this, what was hard for me at first was Batman's voice that Grant was giving him. It was so cheeseball at first that I was like, I'm not digging this at all. Like a lot of the commentary or a lot of the conversation, between Gordon and Batman at first, I'm like, it was throwing me right out. I'm like, I'm not into this. And it felt very like someone didn't know their voices very well and was like, this is what they sound like. But I'll be honest, it quickly turned into a better story once Batman started going through Arkham Asylum. And I realized it almost was like the afterlife of Batman. It felt like, and with using all these different godlike imagery, like with Two-Face and obviously Mr. Freeze and Joker. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I liked it a lot better towards the end. It felt a little, I'll be honest, it felt very, very late 80s convoluted. Like, no, I'm the real villain. Like, surprise. It's like, But again, as I'm saying this, I'm reminded that in anything I consume of any medium, like whether it be film, music, comics, whatever, not prose, because fuck novels. Sorry, just wanted to say that out there.
Unless the Star Wars novels, right?
Yeah.
Spoken like a true writer, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I'm joking because I listen to audiobooks all the time. I love audiobooks. I digress. I'm just joking, Gal. But seriously though, whenever you consume of any medium of art form, you have to take in consideration the time it was created. You have to. If you put it in a vacuum, it's going to be impossible sometimes to enjoy. This was not impossible to enjoy by any means. I still liked it, but it just wasn't like, oh my God, I gotta rave about this. It's something I would rave about. That being said, I did like a lot of where Grant would eventually turn into. You could tell all that's there. And I just didn't like the 80s-ness if you will. That was not really my thing. Dave McKean's art is fine. It's good. It's interesting. it's just not. You could tell he's doing his own thing, which is cool, I guess. But whatever. You guys were telling me to read the ancillary material, and I agreed. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I read the notes and read the scripts, which again, I love Chris is right. I love that process. Whether we're dissecting, how things are made, like with comics or music or movies, I love documentary style. Like, give me all the meat and potatoes of how things are created. I love that inside baseball, if you will. That's why I love like football and things like that, when people can break down plays and like isolate things. I'm a geek about that stuff. It didn't make me like it more, but I appreciated it more, if that makes sense. If that makes sense about it. Again, I would not say this is a bad story. I'd be ridiculous to say that. It's just not a Batman story that I'm going to be like, I'm going to read this again. It's like, I'll read it eventually, but not anytime soon. But I will say, the voice of Batman that I had a hard time getting into, it definitely got better as the story went. And I'm not sure if that was purposeful from Grant's perspective. I don't think it was, to be honest. I just think he got more comfortable. Maybe it was. If he was, he's a genius. And I'll be honest, Grant's a genius, so I'll accept it. But the thing about Grant is that he's a master storyteller, and that was evident. And my favorite part, hands down, I'm not sure if I have a picture of this or not, or Javi, but is Mr. Freeze. That scene was incredible. I thought that was brilliant. And I thought that, to me, is what brought it home, is seeing like Mr. Freeze acting like a god amongst of like all these different inmates. And it makes sense because he's got superpowers, right? So it makes sense in the context of the story of like how like there's a surrealness to everything. And then you show Mr. Freeze and he's pretty much God. And I thought that was pretty brilliant in of itself. And I love Two-Face's depiction too. I thought Joker was Joker. He was definitely on the money, and which is not bad. It just was like, how I explain it is low-hanging fruit. It's there. He took that angle. It worked. It's fine. But I thought, to me, it showed how creative he was through Two-Face and through Mr. Freeze. I thought they were, and Croc too. Croc was fantastic. So all those things were, I thought, were great, which are a good portion of the story, obviously. I just thought that those, to me, were the standouts, and I thought were really interesting. So, and I do love how Grant was like, wrote this really interesting story, and that all these people at DC, as he wrote in the liner notes or whatever, the commentary, how all these people like made fun of him for being like too artsy fartsy, but like this book has like stood the test of time. And I thought that was interesting. And I think it just shows you got, whether you're going for a super artsy kind of look or story, or a straight ahead Batman, like violent story, or whatever it is, the thing I took from this was you have to have conviction for your story. And that's what Grant always has. And I think that's why I love Grant Morrison so much, is because he's so versatile what he can do in comics and as a storyteller, because he has conviction of what he's talking about. And that, to me, is why I think this works and has stood the test of time for people, because he has conviction. There's an authenticness to what he's writing, because he loves what he's writing, whether it be a goofy story or a dark story or a surreal story. I think it's all there. So I like Arkham Asylum. I don't love Arkham Asylum. Shout out to our boy Dylan, who I try to get on for this. He loves the story. I'm curious what he'll think about what I say. He loves the story. He's Dylan from Emerald City Hockey. We've had on before for the Blue Beetle stories. But yeah, Chris, I like it. I like the story. I don't love it. I think it's worthwhile if you're a fan of Batman, obviously. I think there is a interesting, live action movie here, to be honest. I think, if someone would say, people know my, I'm sorry, I'm rambling too much here, Chris. I'm wrapping up, I promise. But the thing about adaptations, I hate when like they're animated, because I'm like, let's read the comic. I do feel like with film and the shadows and everything, and the way you could, I think there's an interesting story element in a film you could do with this. Again, not saying loosely based, but very much heavily, based off of this story that I would like to see. But yeah, animated, no, get that out of here. But film, yes, I would like to see this adapted in some kind of film.
Perhaps a video game of some kind.
And I would say film. Give me film.
I would say play the damn game, Paul. That's what I would say. But
I played the damn game, Chris. You know this.
You didn't finish it, and you have like 25% of the story under your belt, and I am going to scream until the day you die.
I will play it one day. I will. Series. Chris, I'm busy. You know this.
Yeah, I know. You're too busy eating your dinner and watching TV at the same time instead of playing
football,
the Arkham games.
Football, YouTube
videos. And watching the Acolyte on his phone.
And on my iPad. And also
on your iPad, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and my comics, reading my comics, and I'm also playing music again. So, I mean, life is insane. But
a lot, 10% of that time to the Arkham series, and you'll finish it in like a month, probably. I guarantee you. Outside of skill,
the only thing I would say to Paul, because I feel you. It just, like I said, it took me 30 years to appreciate it. So, come back in 2 decades and see how you feel.
I'll read it again. To be honest, like, I mean, the thing about I love,
because I felt really similar to you.
Okay, cool.
So, but it took me a lot of time to get to the love I felt for it in this recent read through.
Well, and here's the thing too, the in terms of being a little challenging for people to understand the flow of the story, Grant Morrison agrees with you because he has said as much, or they have said as much, that it's the styles of both Morrison and McKeon kind of clash in the middle of the story. And Morrison has commented in recent years. In fact, here, let me pull up. So this is actually sourced from a book called Grant Morrison Combining the Worlds of Contemporary Comics. And Morrison said, I imagined it being done by someone like Brian Boland, and my vision was of it being ultra real to the point of being painful. But then when Dave McKeon did it, it became something quite different because he wanted to make it more abstract. And I think that in a lot of ways, the ways we both approached it clashed in the middle. I think it would have been easier for people to deal with if it had been a lot more concrete. And of course, Dave McKeon's own perspectives are well documented. Morrison has kind of thrown shade in Dave McKeon's direction for basically vetoing any appearance of Robin in this story because he felt it was beneath him. McKeon's attitude is very well understood. But if you're doing a Batman story, you might as well go all in. But it's not like it didn't work out, right? It sold something like 600,000 copies within the first year. And that's a lot of books.
Bought a lot of money from the money that he made from this. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And obviously this book is like still does well. So it's not like it's been one of those. This is gonna be really gross. A grower, not a shower, right? Like, so that's what it feels like.
Well, it is part of like the quad of foundational 80s Batman stories. You have DKR,
or Batman stories in general, right?
Well, but I mean, the 80s was really like a level up moment for Batman storytelling because of DKR, Year One, Killing Joke, and this. Like, those are the 4 big 80s foundational Batman stories. And the thing that I find just eminently fascinating, I mean, the way that this book was inspired, or the way that Morrison was inspired to do this book, came in an issue of Who's Who in the DC Universe, written by none other than Len Wein. It was this specific page. And it's a very short description of what Arkham Asylum is, what it's about. You can see they've even got the floor plan there. But it's it added such detail and character to the facility itself that it basically helped birth the entire concept of the story from Morrison's perspective. And it's kind of hard to read here, so I'll just read it because it's not going to take very long. Situated on a wooded acre of land just north of Gotham City, Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane has had a long and checkered history. Founded in 1921 by Dr. Amadeus Arkham on a parcel of land deeded to him by his mother, who had herself been a victim of mental illness, the asylum was the first such facility of its kind in Gotham County. Dr. Arkham, a vigorous social reformer, had been appalled by conditions in the Gotham penal system where those who were not mentally responsible for their actions were incarcerated side by side with hardened career criminals, and he was determined to improve the situation. To that end, he transformed his ancestral home into a high-security mental facility and staffed it with some of the most prominent psychologists and physicians of the time. Ironically, one of Arkham's first inmates was one Mad Dog Martin Hawkins, who had been arrested and tried for the brutal murders of Amadeus Arkham's own wife and infant daughter, then found not guilty by reason of insanity. It is to Dr. Arkham's everlasting credit that he treated Hawkins with great concern and compassion, right up to Hawkins' accidental electrocution 2 months after his incarceration. In 1929, 6 days after the now legendary stock market crash, Dr. Arkham, who had lost his entire fortune, apparently went berserk and was subdued and arrested while attempting to electrocute his former stockbroker. Found not guilty by reason of insanity, Amadeus Arkham was committed to his own asylum, where he spent the remainder of his days carving indecipherable inscriptions on the floor of his cell with his fingernails while softly singing the battle hymn of the Republic. Amadeus Arkham passed away quietly in his sleep on April 7th, 1963, a faint smile etched forever on his lips. Since Dr. Arkham's incarceration, his asylum has had a series of state-appointed administrators, the most recent being Dr. Byron Blaine, who has held the position since his predecessor was taken captive and temporarily replaced by Professor Achilles Milo, one of the asylum's inmates. Arkham Asylum's other most notable inmates include ex-district attorney Harvey Dent, plant master Jason Woodrue, Jervis Tetch, and his pet chimp, the grotesquely misshapen Preston Payne, self-styled Roman god Maxwell Zeus, and the ever-enigmatic Joker. It should be noted that the Joker once maintained a scaled-down version of his secret hacienda beneath his cell in Arkham, but this has since been discovered and cemented closed. The level to which Morrison stuck with this history is kind of amazing, because a lot of the details as it relates to Amadeus Arkham, the accidental electrocution of Mad Dog, all of the murder of his wife and his daughter, all of that stuff is here. The only detail that got fudged, and Morrison mentions this in the back matter of the book, was instead of Battle Hymn of the Republic, he did the national anthem for some reason as the song that he sang as he was on his way out the door. But clearly an extremely influential piece of comic book mythology, and of course, you know, the mind of Len Wein it serves an architectural role in what we know as comic book storytelling today. But that's what planted the germ of the tragedy of Amadeus Arkham into the mind of Morrison, and the innovative 1-2 punch of books like Watchmen and DKR further gave the creative team the energy and the momentum to see the book through. And another critical force, editor Karen Berger. She was effectively responsible for much of the British invasion of comics in the 80s and went on to serve as a pillar at DC's former mature imprint Vertigo. She's the one who's credited with assembling the creative team, and it sounds like she had to drag Dave McKean kicking and screaming into the realm of superheroes. My relationship with this book is a little complicated. I didn't read the script until, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. It was when I actually cracked open this sucker that I've got here, my Absolute Edition, which is blurred out, but this, I assure you, this is the Absolute Edition of Arkham Asylum. Yeah, it's pretty great. And this format does this book a lot of favors too, by the way, you know, just the size of it. And this is the reassembled artwork, as you alluded to before, Javi. But yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't thinking of this book as really a definitive Batman story, but and to Paul's point earlier, because he mentioned Mr. Freeze actually isn't in this book. You're thinking of Maxie Zeus. I totally get where you got Freeze from, because it looks like Freeze, but yeah, it's Maxie Zeus, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that's just
My
another
bad.
way.
Sorry.
No. You make Grant Morrison's point really effectively, I think, because that's one of the details that is lost by such an abstract approach that McKeon apparently championed. So there would have been probably, I'm sure that that's not, an isolated incident. I'm sure that a lot of people might have assumed things just based on appearance, because these are the cues as Batman fans that we're used to seeing from different characters. And it's just like shrouded in the electricity lighting up the room, and he's supposed to be sort of working an electroshock therapy room in this instance. But the thing that I come back to with this is that we were talking about timelessness or timefulness before we got on as it relates to Batman Cape Crusader, but this story feels like a pretty fascinating artifact of its time. The 80s were a really embryonic period for what we now understand to be modern comic book storytelling. And Paul, you and I have talked a lot about what constitutes modern versus later or dark age or whatever it might be. But without this book, I don't think you have as much of the maturation of the medium, particularly in superhero storytelling, as you got in Arkham Asylum. The book leans in a lot on pushing the envelope for what was considered acceptable at the time, and arguably goes over that line in a few different instances. And it's the thing that I find really fun about it now is reading it in context with this run, because in those annotation notes, Morrison makes reference to Arkham Asylum as a critique of the predominant 80s conception of Batman, and that he's kind of a broken guy. He's sexually repressed. He apparently exhibits outright misogyny, according to the way that Morrison wrote the script pages. And that's all elements for him to overcome. By the time we reach the end of the story and he has effectively cleansed himself of the demonic presence of the facility itself that he was apparently like a part of, then that is room for what Morrison would do with Batman later in the pages of JLA, and then in the run that we're reading now over the course of this series. So there really is, kind of like with Frank Miller, there is like a continuity of development that you can observe with Morrison's Batman storytelling and the way that the character is perceived specifically by Morrison. And I think that that's really just fascinating. I mean, Batman's kind of a pitiable figure by design. And that's Morrison's way of commenting on the overly brutalistic depiction of Batman popularized by writers of the era. Frank Miller's name is never mentioned in the back matter, but it's kind of hard to think of anybody else, right? And but he is broken, and that also makes this story a bit of an outlier, because it is very much a prelude to the more heroic. And what did he say about the way he said, I envision Batman now the way Neil Adams drew him, as this dominant 70s love god. And I always loved the way that he described that. But there's a lot of depth here, and there is so much depth to it, in fact, that it is hard to decipher outright in several places. And that's why I think reading the script is really, really helpful. It's particularly interesting if you read the script first and then you actually read the story, because you can trace the paths very easily through the thread of the narrative, but at least more easily than you could if you just go into it cold. But whether anybody has the time or the inclination to do that and to give the story the time that will make it a more rewarding experience, that I can't say. That's up to an individual to make that decision. But at the end of the day, it's a fascinating work. No, go ahead, please.
No, I thank you. Thank you so much. You always do a great job, Reverend, of bringing this all like in and give us perspective. And I think the one thing that really clicked for me that makes sense, and especially in hindsight, and I got a little bit of this. Listen, the one thing I love about the Knights Never Die whole thing is the fact that it's Grant Morrison. Everything he does is layered, in my opinion, obviously, and more so than other writers. And I think he does that because I think good storytellers do that, to be honest. They take whatever again, I said before, they take whatever they do seriously, and they whether it be he's convicted or he has conviction of what he's writing, whether it be a silly story about Damian Wayne and Dick Grayson fighting Red Hood and whatever, but like there's always there's an underlying context and like deeper meanings to whatever, and sometimes they're deeper meanings, they're so deep that like they're kind of hidden a little bit, right? But one thing you talked about that I do appreciate in hindsight is the fact that there is the whole like love God thing that he talks about now, that's not really there in the story. And you see a lot more of a Batman who's not really in control of the situation. And I think that's fascinating in the story. And I think it's one of the best parts about it, is the fact that Batman is not in control. He's actually behind the eight ball. And I think that between Grant and Dave, they do a pretty good job of depicting that, where I don't feel that Batman's in control and he actually is like in considerable danger. Part of that is the story that Grant put up, and a lot of that is by Dave McKean's artwork. And you give these villains a very larger than life, like fantasy element, if you will. And that's why I kind of liked, I do like where the surrealistic excuse me, the very stylized dynamic goes into. It makes Batman look weak, like weaker and not as powerful, because everyone's so larger than life and has a distinct face. Batman's not really a distinct face. Everyone else has one, but he doesn't. And there's a sense of like, because of that, there's such recognizable, or there's such a distinct facial features, and Batman's just kind of in shadows and kind of meek. There is a sense of danger there. And I really like that about this, to be honest. And again, it's purposeful, and a commentary on this big burling man in Dark Knight Returns, and how like this physical specimen that Batman is, he's depicted as a skinny, lanky, and let's be real, when you depict someone as super lanky and skinny, there's a weakness element. So there is a built-in weakness, or not as strong element to that. Now there's certain things you could talk about how that goes against that with like Kelly Jones, if you will, because there's definitely a Kelly Jones element that's I think taken from Arkham Asylum. I'm not sure if it's purposeful, but that's definitely how I interpret it. And Batman's depicted as very skinny and scrawny and whatever. And I think that kind of help add to the element of danger, and like Batman's not in his element. And this is a great depiction of that. Like Batman, that's not how Batman's drawn, That's not a bad thing, but that's, again, it adds that element. This is where I think it adds to the medium, and Dave McKean's really done a good job of like giving us like, it gives us that, the subconscious like feeling of Batman's in danger because of the way he draws him, just inherently, right? And I think there's a brilliance to that, to be honest. So I think that you saying that makes a lot of sense in the context of the story, and not just in the obvious ways, but but I think the more subliminal ways of like making Batman skinny and scrawny, and like, and these villains are a lot more bigger and larger than life, and he's this kind of this shadow of blackness, and everyone has a distinct face. So there's a lot of cool elements there that I think that are there. But yeah, like I do think there's an importance of the story for sure, but I don't love it yet, but maybe I will in the future. But I definitely appreciate it and like it. It's just not my favorite those elements there that Grant and Dave had done.
Well, and just to put a fine point on it, the words of Morrison in the back matter, talking specifically about the depiction of Batman, I'd also like to stress that the portrayal of Batman presented here is not definitive and is not necessarily how I would write the character otherwise. The repressed, armored, uncertain, and sexually frozen man in Arkham Asylum was intended as a critique of the 80s interpretation of Batman as violent, driven, and borderline psychopathic. My own later portrayal of Batman in the JLA comic was one which emphasized the character's sanity and dignity. In the end, I figured that anyone who had gone so far and had been so successful in his quest to avenge his parents' death and to help other people would have ended up pretty much straightened out. Bruce Wayne would only have become conflicted and mentally unstable if he had not put on his scary batsuit and found the perfect outlet for his feelings of rage, guilt, and revenge. And he also, or Morrison also went on to talk specifically about, the conception of Batman as envisioned by someone like Neil Adams. He said the appraisal of Batman's sexuality, which you can see in the script, where he basically says women are weak, as this is what Batman thinks. Batman thinks women are weak. But Morrison says, again, this appraisal of Batman's sexuality applies only to the damaged version of the character presented within these pages. I prefer to think of him now as Neil Adams drew him, the hairy-chested, globe-trotting love god of the 70s stories. I think that is a pretty critical element in terms of understanding the characterization of Batman. None of the sexual messaging is particularly overt in this story, outside of one instance where the Joker pinches him on the ass and says, "Loosen up, tight ass." And Batman is like utterly disgusted by such a thing. But the fact that was kind of in the minds of the creative team is another thing for him to overcome. And that's one of the things that I think makes reading the script a really important companion to reading this book. But again, that's a lot of work to ask for someone to dive into this story. The Madonna,
which is why I've got this image up, because that's talking about the sexuality that Morrison wanted to inject into the book and Batman's reaction to it. Like, this was what he wanted Joker to look like. He wanted to envision Joker as Madonna from this, I think it was Like a Virgin. I don't have the exact page in front of me, but you can see in like these sketches that there is like that element to Joker's outfit where he does have the cones going on, and that's what like Morrison was trying to counterbalance, because if you've got the sanity of Batman, the insanity of Joker, or the order of Batman and the anarchy of Joker, like that was another one of those contrasts between the misogynistic, rigid, what did they say in the original script? We can imagine him walking with his buttocks clenched. His is the posture of an obsessive anal personality. This Batman is a frightened, threatened boy who's made himself terrible at the cost of his own humanity. He is completely incapable of any kind of sexual relationship. He has made himself hard and domineering in order that he might never be hurt or abandoned again. Only in action does this rigidity relax, and then Batman becomes a fluid shadow. Which,
man,
yeah, some of it kind of survived and some of it didn't.
Is lost in translation
again. Yeah, it's when you don't see that necessarily when all you get is that shape.
I have to bail out, but just my final thoughts really quick, and I'll let you guys to it. I know you guys are wrapping up probably soon too, but yeah, I like Arkham Asylum, and I think you guys both have kind of made me like look at it a little differently and helped me kind of process a little bit of it. And again, I never disliked it, didn't love it, but like you said, Javi, maybe I'll go revisit it again and appreciate it a lot more. Regardless, Grant Morrison's a great writer, and I pretty much love majority of the stuff I read of his. So I still enjoyed it. So, I mean,
I'll leave you with this, Paul. There's a reason why we're going into this run as hard as we are. You have not read the best Grant Morrison Batman story yet.
No, and listen, and this is someone who's read, I think, all of Batman and Robin with Dick Grayson up until Bruce comes back. And I love that run. That run is fantastic. So
but you still hate Damian.
What's that?
You still hate Damian, though.
I don't hate Damian. I don't like Damian.
Oh, you've evolved a little bit then. Okay, that's good. That's good.
I think I had to. He's lasted 20 years. I mean, I can't put my head in the sand and be like, no, Damian's the worst thing ever. You know,
You'd be surprised. Some people are capable of holding on to hate for a long time.
Trust me, I know. I know.
He's a Spider-Man fan. He knows.
Right? Yeah. We'll have a conversation in 2037 about Luke Skywalker and see where you're.
Could be Spider-Man. That's not possible. That's never gonna work. Oh, sorry. Just wanted to get that out there. Thanks for reminding me, Javi. Anyway, guys, thanks for all joining us. Yeah, read more comics and go subscribe. Love you guys. Talk to you later.
Take care, man. Thanks.
Have a good dinner, dude.
I will.
Yeah, guy needs to eat. I swear, he shouldn't do that to himself. I'm trying to tell him to take better care of himself, but you know, I'm one to talk. But well, Javi, one thing that I don't think we've touched on yet that we really need to, especially before we get together the next time, is the specific depiction of the Clown Prince of Crime himself. Because although the Joker is arguably more of like a tour guide in this story, by design, there is still a pretty key piece of information that is introduced about Morrison's conception regarding the idea of super sanity and the way that the Joker just continuously reinvents himself, because the way that he processes external stimuli is just so different from the way that other people do, that he is effectively forced to change his personality at any given time. This was Morrison's way of justifying why the Joker can go from a whimsical clown in one story to a vicious killer in another. This was right around the time that readers were going to decide the fate of Jason Todd. A reference to Robin in the story could have been seen as a tasteless reference to the recent death of Jason Todd. But I gotta just ask you, especially considering where we're about to go and what you know is coming down the pike in stories like RAP and in later issues, how does this piece fit for the Morrisonian conception of the Joker for you?
I mean, I think it's right in there. I mean, it's like every interpretation is valid, right? Because over 85 years we've had that, and it's the same with Batman, you know. And that's one of the things I love about Morrison's work on this character in particular is everything matters, everything happened in some fashion, and he tries to tie it in together and give an overarching reason for why that would be. Like it's just, he's validating everything. It's kind of like the concept of hyper time, you know, where every comic you read happened. Maybe it's not relevant in this continuity, but it happened. Just because a crisis occurred doesn't mean that issue you loved when you were 7 doesn't matter, because it matters to you. And that's kind of what like Morrison is getting at here in like the early stages before we get to like Multiversity and Final Crisis and some of his other more, you know, out there works. It's a different Joker than we see in the era, I feel like. And a lot of that has to do with the art. Like, look at those eyes being painted does so much more to the effect than Aparo's Joker in Death in the Family and Boland's Joker, who is, I mean, so many, you couldn't escape Brian Boland's Killing Joke art on people's shirts in 1989. I mean, it was ubiquitous. And this just ratcheted it up to like another level. And it just, there's something about the way that he stares at you, the reader, it's so unsettling, but it's no more valid or invalid than like a Jerry Robinson Joker. And that's kind of what I dig about the characters, because you can have Mark Hamill and you can have the Batman version, the animated cartoon, not the Pattinson movie. You know, and they're all still the same character. What did you think of it?
Oh, it's particularly fascinating to absorb it now, knowing where Morrison would take the character in the years to come.
Especially in Batman and Robin.
Yes, but also R.I.P. And I mean, look, I'm giving away the story a little bit, but I really like The Clown at Midnight. I'm very excited to jump into the particulars of that story because it is such an intimate look inside the mind of the Joker that we arguably did not get since this story, which is kind of amazing considering how few pages, relatively speaking, the Joker occupies in Arkham Asylum. I felt like my understanding of the Joker and why he's such a threat was amplified considerably by reading Arkham Asylum, even though it's a comparatively small part of the overall story. So doing that, or laying the groundwork for that, and then sort of extrapolating that outward in later components of, and there's some of it in JLA. Morrison uses Joker sparingly in a couple of stories of JLA. Yeah. Right. But I don't think that anybody, at least that I've seen yet, has written the Joker better than Grant Morrison. And this is the first step toward that characterization that in my mind is so definitive. So on that basis alone, that made this required reading in context with the full run, because as much as the Joker was just kind of along for the ride on this particular story, he is a big player in the rest of the run on the ongoing title, whether you see him or not. I feel like his presence looms large over a great portion of the stories, up to and including the ones that he actually does appear in. So this was a very necessary detour, all that to say.
Well, and it helps set the table too, because that issue is painted. And being with the pros, like, it just, you have to be in a different headspace to read that comic, because when you read it collected, especially, I feel like it kind of grinds the trades to a halt, because you have to switch your brain. Because while there are visuals, it's not like a comic book. The sequential storytelling is not there, and you have to do more work as a reader. Not that Morrison doesn't give you a lot of striking visuals to work with his prose, but it does require more of you to invest in. And I still, catch myself wondering, what would that story look like if, we had Kubert draw or Tony Daniel draw? Like, how many issues would it be? Would it be a 3-part story? Would it be a 6-part story? Like, what? I'd love to see an alternate take on that. Just for my own curiosity than anything else. And
Sure.
and in these days, you never know. I mean, next week is J.M. DeMatteis has got his second issue of, what if Jason Todd had lived?
Right.
So, here we are 35 years later and still talking about that story. So anything's possible.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm pretty excited to reread it in absolute format. Since the last time we got together, Absolute Batman and Son has been released. It's on my shelf and it's beautiful. So
Lucky.
definitely going to be cracking that sucker open when the time comes. But let's start winding this down. So as you can probably imagine, contemporary reactions of the time for Arkham Asylum are a little hard to come by. But the book a book like this, it's had no shortage of appraisals and reappraisals in recent years, just owing to its massive popularity, arriving at the perfect time for what is arguably Batman's biggest pop culture renaissance. We can debate between 66 and 89, but it seems like 89 it looms a little bit larger. Maybe just it's a recency bias, even though it was, a long time ago now. But Rolling Stone magazine in 2016, they named Arkham Asylum one of the best stories from Grant Morrison, saying that it is groundbreaking, that it's grim and it's twisted artwork, and that it is darkly poetic and psychologically rich. Yeah, those are all apt descriptions of Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. Well done, Rolling Stone. IGN's Hillary Goldstein in 2005, prior to the theatrical release of Batman Begins, they started assessing things, works in the comics before the movie came out. Goldstein heralded Arkham Asylum as one of the finest superhero books ever to grace a bookshelf, and also ranked it as number 4 on a list of the 25 greatest Batman graphic novels, outdone only by The Killing Joke, Dark Knight Returns, and Year One. All 4 of the critical 80s stories are at the top of that list. Newsarama's Lucas Siegel in 2008 said that it was a striking, beautiful, and disturbing book. Yeah, no shit. Good job, Newsarama. All right, all good. And none other than Christopher Nolan cited this story. And interestingly enough, the issue we're going to read next, The Clown at Midnight, as pivotal building blocks for the portrayal of the Joker in The Dark Knight. Interestingly enough, a lot has been said about Heath Ledger's Joker diary that he kept. And in that diary, apparently, is a verbatim list of the things that the Joker finds funny that you can find in The Clown at Midnight that we will talk about next time. But it sounds like Arkham Asylum was also present on Mr. Ledger's shelf. I don't know how deeply he read it, of course, but it was there. And I think that says something. But clearly, this is a very inspirational work. We've talked on this show before about Javi's and my mutual love of the Batman Arkham video game series. Probably most influential on the first game. That is a very claustrophobic, a little more horrific kind of video game experience, groundbreaking for its time. And a lot of clues from this book make it into that game in various places.
Yeah.
The scrawling on the floor by Amadeus Arkham himself, you can find that in the game if you explore the asylum substantially enough. And there's other hints to like Mad Dog and the history related to Amadeus's later influence on the administration of the facility. If you haven't played that game, you absolutely need to play Batman Arkham Asylum. Don't know who that applies to. I like to think everybody's played it, but I'm good friends with Paul Herman, so I know that's not true.
My son has not. I keep getting on him to play it, and he's like, "Well, you haven't played Persona 5 yet." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." So,
well,
these days.
Well, hey, I mean, who looms larger, Joker in Persona 5 or Bruce Wayne? I don't know. That's a question only you guys can answer.
That's right.
But
I'm curious because that one review had mentioned it being in like the top 25 or whatever. Would this fall in your top 25 Batman stories?
In terms of importance to the character, probably. In terms of personal enjoyment, probably not. But we'll get into why in subsequent discussions on Knights Never Die. But it is a critically important first step for Grant Morrison Batman, you know?
Yeah.
And clearly Morrison did not have a super well-developed perspective on Batman himself that would be carried forward. But you don't get there unless you stop here first. So I think it's pretty fair to characterize Arkham Asylum as the granddaddy of the run that we're absorbing here. But what about you?
No, I'm pretty similar. It might crack my top 25 at number 25. I haven't really given it a lot of thought, but like you said, the critical importance of it and what it did, especially in that weird, back half of the 80s where like comics grew up. And I was like at the perfect age for that. I mean, because I've said multiple times, like my dad would go to the used bookstore and buy me whatever comics for like 50 cents. And they were usually just older ones, and Silver Age stuff that he was familiar with. I didn't get a lot of new stuff off the rack. So I feel like a lot of, I grew up with comics at the same time, because when I was a teenager, it's like I was reading Batman and it was such a different experience than World's Finest that I was used to, where like Batman and Superman are trying to like woo this princess and Lois and Vicky are getting jealous. It was a lot different when you had a serial killer chopping up women and leaving them in the dumpster, and Batman becomes friends with one of them before she becomes a victim, and how that tore him up. Like it was a completely different dynamic, and having this, 1, 2, 3, 4 punch of Dark Knight and Year One and Killing Joke and Arkham Asylum, like the maturity level, just, it wasn't something I'd ever encountered before. So I'm not as high on like Killing Joke as I used to be as a kid, but it's still like one of those just important stories to me because of the maturity of the content, and just it proves that you can take these characters and push them and still have them resonate. And that's why we're here, because we're going to push a lot. Morrison, I should say, is going to push a lot of what Batman's capable of and what kind of stories he can tell.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, there are so many fun places for us left to go. It's going to be hard to wait for it, but I think we're up to the task. It should be really fascinating, particularly for people who may not have absorbed this run before. And I know it's been a long time, but I can assure you that our commitment has not wavered. We are very much looking forward to progressing through this run as long as we possibly can, just because it is a favorite for very good reason. And there you go. Yeah, you're right on, Javi. Eric says so.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. Much obliged. We appreciate everybody who's checked this out. Thank you for checking out this episode of Knights Never Die. Javi, before we do dismiss, where can people find you and what you're doing?
All over the internet. At thejamesbonddossier.com, I've got reviews for just James Bond comics. I've got the 3rd issue of Garth Ennis's one, should be posting soon once David's back from holiday. Obviously, Up to Speed with Wally West is my YouTube channel. I'm breaking down the Flash issue by issue, starting in the 80s. The Wally West run was going to record today. Didn't happen, but Nights got done, so that's important. And Batman-on-film.com, as Bill likes to say. I don't know if you've heard, Chris, but there's a new Batman cartoon.
Really?
Called Batman Cape Crusader. And I do a lot of Batman animation episodes for the website, and we did a reaction review. Bill, Pete, and I did a reaction for the first episode like 5 hours after it aired. So that was an early morning. So I think I may have to talk more about that first episode with a good buddy soon. Maybe break it down a little bit more. But and then just written Batman reviews, Batman and Robin, Batman, the Brave and the Bold, Catwoman, Batman and Robin. Not a title I've been fond of lately, but last issue was interesting and fun, and next week's issue might be the best one yet. So good and very pertinent to some Knights Never Die stuff as well. So check out Batman and Robin next week, wherever you get your comics.
Excellent. Very well said. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter /X, even though that name is stupid, Threads, Instagram, etc. at Chris Clow, CHRISCLOW. Check out Discovery Debrief, the Star Trek podcast. If you haven't before, we have an episode in the can where we're breaking down all of the developments and news for the franchise that emerged out of Comic-Con International in San Diego. So expect that pretty soon. And be sure to keep it tuned to the Comic Binge for all the great discussions and comics that Paul, Javi, and I and several of our friends have cooking up for you. But of course, the best way to stay in touch, commenting. That's always
or muffled.
Oh, the music kind of does that in StreamYard. Yeah. Maybe if I go like this, then it'll be okay. But that is going to do it for this edition of Knights Never Die. Next time, now that we have an understanding of the psyche of Batman's greatest enemy as seen through the eyes of this writer, it's time to jump back into the depths of madness with Batman number 663, The Clown at Midnight, released in 2007. Pretty important step to what will follow in the months and years ahead. However, though, that's going to do it for this time. Until we get to Batman 663, remember, Batman and Robin will never die. Thanks.